Sometimes failing to get your goal gives you your destiny. It's always interesting to see people's vision of their future. Almost always, it's positive. The one thing that we can control is our vision of ourselves in the future, even though we can't control the future itself. If you ask a girl, where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years? Oftentimes you'll hear a story where she works successfully for some years, finds her one true love, a man who sweeps her off her feet, and she lives happily with 3 perfect kids in a perfect house with a nice picket fence. Or if you ask a young guy, you might hear that he hopes that he gets the highest grades in school, gets into Harvard Medical School, does his residency at Massachusetts General, and works his way up through the ranks to become chief of medicine. If you are a younger guy, you might have that one girl you have a crush on. She becomes your girlfriend. She rides shotgun in your nice shiny car after school where you go out for ice cream. On Friday nights, you go to the movies together. And on hot summer afternoons when school is out, you lie underneath a tree in the shade with her and talk about a future together, one that's happy and where you both are youthful forever. These are, in essence, romanticized old stories, and they never account for reality. So the question is what happens when life gets in the way? What happens when we tell the version of those stories embedded in reality? What happens if that girl who meets her Mr. Perfect is never able to have kids? Or despite high grades, that guy is never able to get into medical school? What happens when your high school girlfriend goes to college across the country? These are common situations, but they're hardly ever mentioned when people get asked that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And unfortunately, these are the things that cause pain and hardship. When things that are happening now do not match with how we saw them in the past. These are the things that cause people to lose sight of the dreams that they had when they were younger. So I want you to think of your life as it is today and be honest with yourself. Typically, everybody has at least one thing going for them that they're happy with. And for some people, it might be their career. For others, it might be their academic performance and getting good grades. Or for others, it might be their relationship with their significant others. And for yet some other people, it might be their weight and how they look. But for every single person, the reason that you're happy with that particular area in your life is because things are going the way that you saw them, maybe even better. And it's the notion that you have things in your control, the idea that you're doing what you need to do to get the results that you want that creates that happiness. Now, the central idea behind all human interactions is control, or at least the perception of control. And in English, we use the phrase keeping it together. Someone who's not a native English speaker might ask, well, what is it? And furthermore, why is it something that we should ensure is in a state of together? Simply said, it is your vision of yourself. And ensuring that it is together implies that you have control over yourself, that your image of self is aligned with your ability to hold control, or most simply, you have control over yourself. It also encompasses your future state, as how you see yourself is a major component of you. When you start to lose sight of how you see yourself, and that you realize yourself is not quite how you saw it in the past, things start to break down and people start to panic. People inherently react negatively to a loss of control. Let me give you a few examples that are not pertaining to life plans, but this is to prove a point. When somebody gets really angry in public and starts shouting and screaming, a lot of times people will stand in awe to watch it. Some other people will laugh, as if somebody had lost the control of their own anger, that their grip on their persona has completely disappeared, and that it no longer exists. It's always a spectacle to see when somebody loses control over their own anger. And it just brings off a very bad image. Another example is when people show up in public dressed like they crawled out of bed, unshaven, with bad hair and bad breath. It signifies a lack of control over one's appearance. Typically, you'll never see a politician holding office looking like they crawled out of bed. There are a few exceptions, but those are the exceptions and not the rule. Now, when somebody loses a game to another person and rage quits, it signifies a loss of control over that person's ego, and that person ends up looking like a sore loser. So, while all of these examples of control in social situations would result in embarrassment, there are several instances where you won't have control over the events that happen to you. And one of the most crushing defeats of someone I've ever seen is when that person is told that they have a chronic disease, a disease that will stay with them for the rest of their life. And an example here is the diagnosis of cancer. I've seen this before in my practice, and in my experience, when these people are formally diagnosed with their illness, their sense of self is completely shattered, that it is no longer being kept together, and that there's a possibility that it was never kept together in the first place, as if they are not the person that they thought they were and will never be the person that they envisioned. Now, even without disease, a healthy person can still feel a sense of discontent when their life no longer follows their vision of self, that they are not the person today who they thought they would be years ago. And let me give you an example. Back in 2014, I was taking a lead on a big project for one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical companies. It was tuberculosis and malaria research. The funding came from private backers and the government. And when I incorporated a company, I officially started a business. I had employees. And I was somebody who was driving a main branch of research. We had longer timelines, and I got the notion that I had job security so long as I could find more clients to help with research. And this was a spot that would help me in my career. In a few years' time, this business could lead way to bigger projects and more clients and having more impact in the industry and on medical research. Now, throughout 2014, I had several problems plague my company and problems with expanding to other projects and finding new clients. In fact, we didn't find any new clients at all. And by September of 2014, my main contact from the company that we were working with told me that there was a possibility that the government might withdraw funds from the project in order to fund a different one. And with those loss of funds, I'd be out of a job. My company would be in the hole. I would have failed my employees. And lo and behold, a week before Christmas, I got the phone call from that contact telling me that the project is over, that the funds were withdrawn. It was finalized, and that was it. There was no new clients. There was no new projects. The company was dissolved. I was unemployed. I had failed my employees. I had failed myself. Now, I remember the night that it happened. I had an exit strategy if in case things went south, but it wasn't a great option. And I sat in my apartment in Chicago thinking, well, this reality is here to stay. That funding is never coming back. I've lost the trust of the people that worked for me. It was over. There was nothing that I could do for my own future unless I redefine myself. If I didn't redefine myself, Bernard no longer exists in the way that I see him. Now, another example for me was earlier this year. I was in a relationship with a girl who I saw I had a future with. I envisioned that future while I was in the relationship with her. I remember distinctly thinking of a life together with her. And when we broke up, my vision of that future was completely shattered. When I go back and look at it and reevaluate it, the person who I envisioned that future that looked like her wasn't actually her. And even more was that myself in that vision of the future also wasn't me. The reality behind it was that either one of those people who looked like me and looked like her were neither the actual Bernard or the actual girl herself. Too often, we stick ourselves into one image. We commit everything that we have to a single image of ourselves, and we build an identity around it. That is, if you're successful in one thing, that's all you are. But we know that that's not true, and no one is strictly one-dimensional like that. A person who's good in business can be a good father, a good athlete, a good husband, and a good son, all at once. No one lives for only one purpose. Now, if you can believe that life happens for you rather than to you, you'll find benefits and opportunities to anything that happens to you, good or bad. Opportunity in the worst of times that force you to redefine your vision of yourself. Every single one of us is going to feel major trauma in our lives, as if things are forcibly taken away from us. But what are you going to do about it? Some people will live the story that they had everything stripped away from them and that they're helpless. That's fine. No one says that they can't do that. But the other thing that they can do is ask themselves, what do they deserve to give themselves? And whether they ought to give themselves only the negatives that come out of the situation. No, I still believe that every single person can transcend the trauma that they encounter, and that the trauma one encounters is a catalyst to redefine yourselves. Maybe it was the universe telling them that their definition of self could be better, and that they owe it to themselves to reevaluate that view. If two people go through the same trauma, one person could be completely destroyed and ruined for life, and the other person can grow. That person will deepen their relationships. Your real friends come out in times of tragedy. An old Eskimo quote goes, "You don't know your friends from enemies until the ice breaks." You think when times are tough that your Facebook friends are going to stick around for you, or that your college drinking buddies will be there, or your Instagram followers are going to be there for you? It's going to be your family and your closest friends that are there for you. When you believe that life happens for you rather than to you, you're given a sense of freedom, knowing that the things that you pursue might give you hardship, will give you hardship, but that hardship will redefine you. That trauma and tragedy will force you to see yourself and the world in a new perspective. And when you bring the lessons in from all the other times that you redefine yourself, you grow as a person. There's always something good to come out of what is seemingly bad. And truly, sometimes failing to get your goal gives you your destiny. And that's it for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. I hope you did, or if you learned something, or if I've motivated you or helped you in a time of tragedy. Leave me a comment. Do you have any experiences to share? And subscribe if you like to see more. Thanks so much for hanging out with me this weekend, and I will see you in the next one. Adios, amigos.